everyone. Welcome. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. Just trying to make sure everybody makes it in. Okay, and I am recording this, so for others who I've had contact with that would like to see it, but unfortunately due to the time, they're not able to make it. But I'd like to welcome everyone this evening for this wellness workshop. Hold on, I'm gonna let one more person in. Welcome, Kristen. Just kind of starting a little intro and a brief explanation. So we are Boston Singers Resource, partnered with the wonderful Ellen Allen. I'm so excited for you all to see this wealth of knowledge and information that is so futile and educational to all of our lives and our well-being, and especially with audition season and just so many things going on right now. Ellen is going to give us the whole rundown of how to better take care of ourselves. So I'm going to pass it away to you, Ellen. Let me, oh, are you unmuted?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Cool. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. I'm so glad to see you all here. Welcome to Sugar, Stress, and Sleep Holistic Immune Support for today's singer. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'd like to thank Margaret and Julie Marr and the team at BSR for hosting this workshop and helping to organize everything and coordinate. So as Julia Mara mentioned, my name is Ellen Allen, and I'm a singer, voice teacher, and certified holistic wellness coach. So I've been singing here in Boston for the past, decade or so, doing a lot of mostly choral and concert work. So I currently sing with cantata singers and with Triad, Boston's Choral Collective, which is a group that performs new music. I've also operated a full-time voice studio for the past decade, and working with high school and avocational adult voice students. And now I'm also a certified holistic wellness coach. So when I began pursuing this newest additional career path, I decided I wanted to help singers focus on their health and wellness, not just because of my own journey, which I will talk about in a little bit, but because we singers have heard the phrase, like your body is your instrument from day one. And we're hardly ever given advice on how to actually care for that instrument. So that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. So this workshop is going to address holistic immune support and what I believe are the three main pillars of a strong immune system. So when you registered for this workshop, you filled out a form with some questions about what you're most interested to learn about this topic, and you were able to submit questions that you wanted to be answered. And these were all really great questions. People asked about a wide range of things, like from nutrition to exercise to what do I do about acid reflux and how does trauma affect our wellness, and so much more. These were all really common questions and issues, and many of them will be addressed as we go through the workshop. But if you have additional questions or you'd like further clarification, put your question in the chat, and there will be time for Q&A at the very end. All right. So because of the times that we're living in, I feel like it's important for you to know that immune support was a focus of mine long before the pandemic ever happened. So while this discussion is perhaps more timely than ever, it is something that's been part of my journey as a singer for a long time. So I was one of those people who'd get those really bad, like terrible, terrible colds twice a year, usually like once in the fall, right after the school year would start, and then like once again in the winter. or the early spring, and they were always really severe, and I would get all the things, like the sore throat and the postnasal drip, and the terrible fatigue that would wipe me out, sinus congestion, the whole thing. And it would take my voice a few weeks to recover from this each time it happened, but it was only twice a year, and so I figured it was normal, and I kind of put up with it. But then fast forward to about 4 years ago, suddenly I was getting these illnesses like all the time, like once every few weeks instead of just twice a year. So like, they'd linger on for weeks, and I'd recover from one, and like all of a sudden the next one would hit, and I'd start the process all over again. And I was doing what I felt like everything to prevent them, like eating a healthy diet, or, so I thought at the time, adequate sleep and hand washing and using humidifiers and steamers and supplements, and even staying away from crowded places sometimes. So maybe some of this sounds really familiar to us all. But none of this really worked. And the more colds I would get, the more cumulatively run down I would become. And then I was reached this point of like complete burnout by the end of the school year. So I knew I couldn't face another year like that. So I, made some changes, and, like I reduced and restructured my work hours. I became dedicated to a new fitness routine and made some dietary changes, and these things worked for a little while. But as the year wore on, it kind of became more of the same. So as you're all singers here, so as you can probably imagine, it was really stressful because I was never healthy enough for long enough to maintain consistent practicing, or to have confidence that my voice would be able to pull through in performance, even though I felt strong in my technique. Like we internalize this like mentality, I think, of like, my technique will get me through, and sometimes it does. Technique can do amazing things for when circumstances are less than ideal, but they can only work so far around certain things. If you have an illness or an injury, sometimes it can't work around it at all. And when this is like an ongoing situation, it's really frustrating. Maybe some of you can relate to that from various circumstances in your own singing life. So, at this point in my life, I was like, what is it going to take to not get these horrible illnesses anymore? So fast forward a few months after that to when the pandemic hit, a year and a half ago. I was already several months into my training to be a wellness coach, and I'd already begun learning about holistic health and seeing benefits and healing in my own life from chronic stress and bouts of frequent illness. And, despite all the stress and uncertainty of those early months of the pandemic, when like everything was locked down and we were all new to this, this brand new existential threat we were all of a sudden facing, I was nonetheless observing with interest the way the immune system was taking center stage in people's conversations. Because we had, no treatments for this disease, we had no vaccines yet, only the precautionary measures that we're all familiar with. So I saw people talking about, upping their vitamin D and zinc and vitamin C, or, using natural immune boosting supplements and things like that. And don't get me wrong, like supplements can be an immensely helpful part of your wellness regimen. I take supplements and use natural immune boosters myself, but they're only part of the picture, and they're not meant to be the foundation of your wellness protocol. So what we're going to discuss today is one part of my health and wellness philosophy, if you will, which is that immune support needs to be holistic and needs to be approached from the inside out. So I just mentioned that supplements and all that jazz are not the foundation of immune support. So we're going to talk about what I believe are, which are nutrition, particularly for gut health, stress management, and the regulation of the nervous system, and sleep hygiene. So maybe you're thinking, like, how do you know that this approach works? Which is a valid question. But I can tell you that these are the things that I've implemented in my own life and in my own wellness regimen And I can tell you that I have not had a single illness like the severe ones that I described to you in over 2 years. So I went from getting a severe cold every like 5 to 6 weeks during the school year to having zero major illnesses since June of 2019. All right, so before we dive in, just like a little disclaimer and heads up here is like I'm not a medical professional. I'm a wellness coach with a focus in nutrition and stress management. So what I'm going to give you today comes from my holistic training and my own experience and my own reading and research, and I hope it will be helpful. However, just because you do everything I say doesn't necessarily mean you'll always avoid illness altogether. Because there are many facets to wellness, and this workshop is designed to give you a starting place and hopefully some action steps, but it's not meant to address every single piece of the puzzle. Also, if you aren't sure whether something that I suggest is right for you, please seek guidance from a medical or a health professional before proceeding. Okay, so I'd like to share my screen. Would that be possible to do? I think the host has to give me permission to do that. Oh, cool. Okay.
Okay, now are you okay to share?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay.
I'm trying to share my iPad screen, which is over here. Okay, so you all can see that? Cool. All right, so here we are. So let us dive in here. So let's define first, what the immune system is. So basically it's a collection of cells and organs and proteins that are distributed throughout your body that work together to fight off pathogens, among other things, but that's one of their main jobs. So this system is working literally around the clock to neutralize, dozens, if not hundreds of threats that we encounter every single day in the things that we eat, in the air that we breathe, and the surfaces that we touch. And most of these threats never even make it to our conscious radar. That is, like, we never experience symptoms of illness because our immune systems deal with them so effectively. However, there are certain things that can wear the immune system down or cause it to overreact, and as a result it becomes less effective at fighting these pathogens and we experience illnesses. So we need to be proactive and do everything we can to keep the immune system strong. So the purpose of this workshop is not to go into all the different component parts of the immune system, like T cells versus cytokines and like all of that stuff, although that's like interesting info to know about. And we're not going to talk about like the specifics of what happens when your body launches an immune response. We're talking about how to support like broad spectrum first defense immunity through a whole body approach, so that when your body is inevitably faced with a threat, your immune system is able to launch an appropriate and efficient response, which may mean you avoid symptoms of illness altogether, or it might mean that you do experience some symptoms, but you're able to heal more quickly. So we're going to discuss some like practical and simple and cost-effective strategies that you can use to get started. All right, so we're going to dive into the first pillar of immune support. You guys can still see my screen, right? But you can't see my computer screen, right? Only the iPad screen. I've never done it this way before. Okay, cool. All right, so gut health. Okay, so gut health is a really hot topic in the medical and health and wellness spheres these days. And that's for good reason, because we're learning more and more about how the health of your gut microbiome, that is like the environment in your gut and like the balance of bacteria that live there, how that environment impacts your overall well-being. So your gut is populated by millions of bacteria that help to digest and metabolize your food and deal with stuff that is unwanted that ends up there through whatever reason. The lining of the gut also serves as a barrier so that unwanted stuff that we occasionally ingest doesn't make it from the gut into the bloodstream and cause all kinds of issues. Your gut is also one of the two largest hormone processing centers in your body, the other being the liver. You might have heard, for example, that most of your serotonin, that like feel good happiness hormone, is made in your gut. So we're learning more and more about the gut-brain connection and how they're constantly sending each other messages and how the state of one can really affect the other and vice versa. So what else does the gut do? It houses about 70% of your immune system. So if we want a strong immune system, we should make sure that the gut is healthy, that we have a good balance of the right kinds of bacteria and are not doing anything to cause unhelpful bacteria to proliferate and take over and cause too many issues. So how do these imbalances happen? You know, that's a really complicated question, and there are all kinds of factors that can influence that. However, one factor that we can control, which has an effect on our gut microbiome, is what we eat. So feeding your gut the right foods will help the good bacteria to thrive, help them to fight off pathogens, and metabolize your food and absorb nutrients properly, and keep unwanted substances out of the bloodstream. So this means we have to talk a little bit about food and diet. I'm going to stop the share for a second. Okay. So first of all, I believe that nutrition should always be the foundation of any health and wellness protocol. So like supplements, not exercise, they're not medications. Those things are all essential and at different times and in different ways. But the truth is that those things will not be as effective as they could be if you're not fueling your body properly. Because you can't like out exercise or out supplement or out drug the effects of a bad diet. Really, you just can't. So before we go any further, like I just want to be clear that I'm not here to judge anybody for their food choices or how they eat. You know, diet, whatever that even means to you, is a really personal thing. And there are a lot of internal and external factors that influence our food choices every day. And I also acknowledge that discussions about food and nutrition can be triggering for some people for different reasons. So I do, you know, want to honor that and acknowledge that. I want to just tell you the way that I think about food and diet, and maybe these things will be helpful to you for things that I kind of think about. You know, maybe they're like Ellen's, you know, nutrition principles. I don't know. So the first is that I don't even like the term diet because like it brings up a lot of icky feelings for people. So I prefer the term food lifestyle because it implies like a much more holistic approach, with food being just one component of your lifestyle. It's an important component, but not the only thing. So that's the first thing, food lifestyle. The second thing is that there is no perfect diet or perfect food lifestyle. It's about finding what food lifestyle is right for you. So what works for you might be different than, you know, what works for somebody else. However, although there is no perfect food lifestyle, I believe there are certain hallmarks of any healthy food lifestyle. Because, you know, while every body is different and certain individuals will process some foods differently, there are certain like metabolic principles that dictate how your body will use certain foods and absorb nutrients. So that leads me to the fourth principle, which is, in light of that, we should make our food choices from the perspective of how will my body use this food? What kind of effect will it have? And I believe that, you know, like when we kind of synthesize these different ideas, it takes the focus away from a diet and away from weight and away from like restrictions and like restrictive eating, and puts the focus on the metabolic health of our bodies. Because what it comes down to is not necessarily, like how much you weigh or what kind of specific diet you follow. It matters if your body is metabolically healthy, whether your cells function optimally or not. So, keeping this in mind helps to kind of free your mind from like, oh, I should avoid this food, and like, I need to eat X amount of this food, and like make sure I get this amount of this. Instead, it just allows us to consider information so that we can make like an empowered choice about what we eat in conjunction with like our preferences, how a particular food makes us feel, and the situation at hand in which we are eating. So it doesn't mean that like you're always eating healthy or like always making the healthy choice, whatever that even means to you. It just means that you have the knowledge and the confidence to own your food choices and be in control of your health. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So that's like my spiel about food. So let's go back little after that little excursus there, back to our discussion about the gut. So, um, this seems to take a second every time I do it. Here we go. Okay. All right. So, um, what foods are good for your gut? So we want to be thinking about whole foods, meaning foods that are in their most natural and unprocessed forms. So, like vegetables in particular are good for the gut. Many of them are packed with vitamins and other micronutrients that we need, as well as antioxidants, which promote good cellular health, and they help to neutralize the effects of environmental toxins in our cells. The other reason that vegetables are good for the gut is because they're full of fiber. And so maybe you've heard before there are two kinds of fiber. There's soluble, meaning that it absorbs water and it creates this like gel-like protective coating in your gut. And insoluble fiber, meaning that it does not absorb water and it helps to move material through your digestive system. Fiber also helps to slow the absorption of carbohydrates, which means it can help to keep your blood sugar stable, which is another thing we want to be thinking about for metabolic health. So you need both soluble and insoluble fiber to feed the good gut bacteria. Like they work together to keep the lining of the gut strong. So foods that we can consider would be like, leafy greens like spinach and kale, stringy foods like celery, cauliflower, beans and nuts and other legumes, and whole unprocessed grains. These are all good sources of fiber. So how much fiber you should eat every day sort of varies with like age and lifestyle and all of that stuff. So different amounts for different people, but thinking about a diet high in fiber is probably not going to hurt you. Other foods that are good for the immune system and the gut are protein. Your immune system needs lots of protein. Proteins are composed of amino acids, and our body makes some amino acids on its own, but there are others that it does not, and we have to obtain them through diet. So that's what we mean by like essential amino acids. It means the ones we have to take in because our body does not manufacture them on its own. So amino acids are the building blocks for cells, including the cells in your immune system, and for muscles. And we all know, the muscles that are important for singing, right? All those big muscles like up and down your torso, the sides of your body, need lots and lots of protein to stay strong. So, meat and animal protein is an obvious source of protein if that is something that you include in your diet. If you don't, there are non-meat sources to get your protein, like eggs, nuts, and legumes. Dairy products like cheese and Greek yogurt also provide a good deal of protein as well. So again, recommended protein amounts do vary with age and lifestyle. So like if you're more active and you work out a lot, and you're putting strain and stress on your muscles, you'll need more protein to help with muscle repair after the workout to build those muscles back up. So when you're choosing your meals, you think about combinations of whole foods that will give you lots of fiber and lots of protein. All right, so that means we do have to talk a little bit about what foods are bad for the gut. Unfortunately, sugar and processed food are kind of your gut's worst enemies because both sugar and processed foods feed the bad bacteria in your gut and can contribute to the breaking down of that protective gut lining, which, as we said, allows things to escape from the gut into the bloodstream, where they cause problems. That's actually a condition known as leaky gut, which sounds really disgusting, but it's a real thing. Um, so, high refined sugar consumption can do all kinds of other things to your body. It's inflammatory, so it can lead to inflammation, it can lead to high blood sugar levels. It upsets the acid balance in your stomach, actually, and can trigger acid reflux. In fact, when I started experiencing reflux a few years back, refined sugar was actually the single biggest trigger for me that brought that on. Sugar is also addictive because it activates the dopamine release in your brain. And so it leaves your cells wanting more. So, sugar is often what we find ourselves craving when we're hungry because our bodies know it can get a quick hit, as it were. Or like when we're cranky or sad, again, because of the dopamine thing. And too much sugar, especially in the form of fructose, can also overload the liver. And we don't want to overload the liver. And of course, important to our discussion, sugar suppresses the immune response. So maybe you're thinking like, wow, what do we do about that? Like, it sounds like we should really limit our sugar intake. And we should, that's a good idea. It's difficult though, because sugar it's kind of everywhere. It's like so ubiquitous that we often consume it without knowing. It's often added as a preservative to processed foods. So even foods that like aren't even sweet, that you wouldn't even consider like a sugary food, do contain like some kind of sugar. It also goes by many names on food product ingredient lists. You might have seen, like cane sugar, fructose, sucrose, high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, maltose. Like all of these are forms of sugar. And, unfortunately, part of the reason for all these different confusing names is because food manufacturers like often don't want consumers to realize what they're eating. They'll even like dress up sugar on ingredient labels with things like organic cane sugar. But it doesn't matter if it's organic or not, it's still sugar. It's going to have the same effect on your body whether it is organic or not. So all that to say, if you ever looked at a nutrition facts label or an ingredient list and like been really confused, like that's really common and you're not alone. Food labeling transparency has such a long way to go in this country. But if you do a little digging and look closely, you notice that some form of sugar is in so many things on the grocery store shelves. Related to all of this, processed foods are also not good for your gut because they're usually devoid of fiber. And as we said earlier, fiber is really good for gut health. They're also usually stripped of whatever other nutrients they had. They're stripped away during processing. So things like, run-of-the-mill bread and pasta, like even the wheat versions, just because like they're brown doesn't mean it's healthier necessarily, still processed. Snack foods like crackers or chips, or breakfast foods like cereal and granola bars. Those are all examples of processed foods. They're not good for your gut because they don't have fiber. They're not nutrient dense. Because the nutrients have been stripped away, you're left mostly with starchy carbs that in some case will spike your blood sugar as much as a candy bar will. Okay, so if you're wondering like, well, what do I do? Like, where do I even start? With cutting back on sugar, I recommend starting with breakfast, because breakfast can be a huge sugar trap with like cereal and breakfast bars and like pre-sweetened oatmeal and like stuff like that. But once you think outside the box a little bit, you can get creative with your breakfasts, and they can be sugar-free and also delicious. So I've compiled a list on a handout that I will share with you all of ways you can eat a low sugar or a sugar-free breakfast. So I'll drop that link in the chat at the end of the workshop. And these are all like everyday foods that you can like mix and match. Whether you like a hot breakfast or you're an overnight oats person or you like smoothies, you know, there are a lot of different ways that you can like unsugar your breakfast. There are other like little ways too. You know, on the slide here, I put a couple of other suggestions, like, you know, like a little bit here and there, like cutting sugar from your coffee. Use You can use stevia, which is a natural plant-derived sweetener, or you could use a little bit of coconut sugar, which is a little bit better for you than the refined white stuff. You know, you can opt for sparkling water and flavor it, you know, with whatever you like instead of soda or fruit juice. So lots of little ways that you can start to like incorporate uh, less sugar into your diet. Okay, so that's the end of the first pillar. So now on to the second pillar of immune support, which is stress management. So we've talked a lot about stress this past year and a half, and with good reason. You know, the pandemic has been so stressful for everybody on so many levels. And at this point, it's probably fair to say that most of us have been under some degree of chronic stress for a while. And it's doubly unfortunate because stress degrades the immune response, which is exactly the opposite of what we want to happen right now. So just like we define what the immune system is, let's give stress a definition also. So when we think about stress, we want to think about it as your body's response to any stimuli that it perceives as a threat. So our bodies are wired with what's referred to as like our HPA axis or our stress axis. H is for the hypothalamus, which is the part of your brain in charge of like perceiving things about your environment. P is for the pituitary gland, which is also in your brain, and that takes orders from the hypothalamus and then passes them on to whatever other organs are going to be like secreting the necessary hormones for the situation. And A is for your adrenal glands, which are tiny glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and they secrete cortisol and adrenaline when charged to do so by their higher ups. So this stress response is innate, and it's there because, you know, we needed it as a survival mechanism back in, you know, caveman days, I guess, when we were running from like the proverbial bear or fighting rival humans for food or shelter. Like we needed that adrenaline increase in order to do those stressful things in order to survive. The problem is that now we're not running from bears or fighting rival humans for food or shelter, I should hope, but our body perceives all the stressors that we face now in the same way that it perceived the bear or the enemy human. Your body doesn't know the difference between that and like an unpleasant encounter with your boss or your toxic work environment or that fight you had with your partner or like that injury you sustained while working out or that illness that you got that's been like hanging on for weeks and weeks. It's all stress to your body, and it's all, you know, it's all processed in the same way. So when stress is chronic and the stressors are ongoing, much like the situation that we have been in the past 18 months, your cortisol levels are elevated, you know, most of the time or all of the time. So cortisol is an important hormone, and we need it for certain things. Like, for example, it helps to control the inflammatory response in the body. But as with all hormones, we need it in the right amounts and at the right times. So imbalanced cortisol levels can affect your sleep, your energy levels, your digestion, your immune response, as you know, as well as your mental and emotional state. So if your cortisol levels are up all the time, your body stays in fight or flight mode, and that HPA axis, that stress axis, is just kind of running on loop, which means that your body is in this constant state of only allocating resources to those systems and processes that it thinks are essential for survival in the stressful moment, right? Um, so if the stressors go on for long enough, your adrenal glands can actually burn out and stop producing the cortisol that you need, which further compounds your immune response because now you don't have cortisol to help control the inflammatory response brought on by a pathogen. The other tricky thing is that respiratory illnesses, in and of themselves, are very particularly hard on the adrenals and can exhaust them in such a way that it takes weeks for them to heal. So it's tough because stress can cause illness, but illness can also feed chronic stress. So what do we do about this if we can't eliminate the stressors that are in our lives? So I think the first step is to notice how your body is responding to various stimuli, which means you have to be able to take a step back and observe what's going on inside your body, which means that you have to be able to ground yourself in the present moment. So we're gonna do a little exercise. Okay. So has anyone done like a body scan exercise before, or like a mindfulness exercise? Yeah, so we're gonna do something similar to that. So I invite you just to kind of sit comfortably, wherever you are, or you can stand or you can lie on the floor, it doesn't matter. As long as you're in a comfortable position where you're able to just observe sensations in your body and you're able to breathe easily. So if you're comfortable, I'd like you to just close your eyes and just breathe and kind of notice, what's happening with your breath. So as singers, we think about breath a lot and we think about breathing in a certain way. So I don't want you to do that right now. Just kind of breathe how you're breathing. See what you're noticing about what part of your body is moving, how your breath feels in your body. And now see if you can shift your attention, like your mind's eye, so to speak, down to your feet. See if you notice any sensations in your feet. Anything in the toes, or the tops of the feet. The ball of the foot, or the heel. And then direct your attention upwards to your shins and your calves, that lower part of your leg. What sensations do you notice there? Bring your attention to your knees. And then to your thighs, your upper legs. What sensations do you notice there? How do your legs feel sitting on the surface against which you are sitting? What does that feel like? If you're sitting up against something, what does your back feel like up against the chair or the couch or whatever surface you're on? And then bring your attention to your face. What's going on in your forehead? In your eyebrows and the muscles around your eyes. In your cheekbones. The muscles up and down your jaw. So now just take a moment to come back to your breath. And see if anything about your breathing feels different from when we first began this exercise. And with the next couple breaths, you can open your eyes and come back into the space here. Okay. So what did you guys notice about that? You can type in the chat, or I think there's, a small enough number here you can unmute. Anybody have any thoughts? Does anybody feel different than how they did at the beginning? It's harder to feel awareness in the lower body than in the upper body. I think as singers, we're like focused on the upper body a lot. So maybe we're not as used to perceiving sensations in our lower body as much. What happened to my chat? Here we go. Yeah, you automatically relaxed when you brought awareness to your back and neck and facial muscles. Yeah. Awareness of bad posture. Yeah, but the idea is just to become aware, right? It's just to notice. It's not to like make a judgment on how things are. Kristen, you do that with one of your students all the time, but your cat decided to interrupt you. Yeah, tension. We tend to notice tension. So again, it's about noticing and not necessarily fixing in that moment. Sometimes we get into like fix it mode and we start to get in our own way. So if we can come at it with the mentality of this outcome is happening, why is that? What can I do about it? Be curious about it. That's part of what these exercises are designed to do. Yeah, it helps through the knees and the hips. Breath became more fluid and less held. Yeah, good. Yeah, so I'm glad that you all noticed some differences with that. So yeah, this kind of exercise helps, with a couple of things. It kind of calms the nervous system by, bringing awareness to the body. It gets us like out of our head and just able to ground in reality. So like we're not like emptying our minds, like we're not going into some kind of zen here. It's a state that we can observe how our body is responding to stimuli. And when we're aware of like how we're reacting to things, we can eventually, hopefully, we're able to halt that stress loop or interrupt the stress loop. So this awareness is something that you can check in with during various points in your day. Like you don't have to have your eyes closed. Like you don't have to be sitting intentionally like we just were. You can do it that way, but you can check in with yourself. If you work with students, Kristen mentioned that she does this kind of thing with her students. During rehearsals, during your practicing is a great time to do that since we're already so focused on what our body is doing during that time. So practicing this awareness when we're not facing an immediate stressor will eventually help us to moderate our response when we do. So it's kind of like vocal technique, right? You know, practice it so it's automatic, and like when we're under a little bit of pressure, we can still do the thing. This is kind of like that. Okay, so that's the physiological side of stress. Then of course there is the mental and emotional side. So, you know, mental and emotional triggers for stress are really complex, and, you know, obviously they sometimes require the help of a mental health professional to process. So, I just want to acknowledge that, you know, upfront, that everyone's mental health journey is different, and everybody has different wounds and triggers, and, you know, those require different levels of intervention. Sometimes, though, you know, the stress that we experience day to day, it's not linked to any particular trauma or clinical diagnosis or anything. It's just like a part of life. And, you know, a certain amount of stress in life is expected and normal. And because it's expected and normal, that means that, you know, we can and should, you know, develop tools um, so that we can better deal with it on our own. And here we are. Okay. Oops. Why does it keep doing that? Here we go. Okay. Um, so since we're all singers here, or at least like we're in voice adjacent professions, I want to take, you know, like the singing career as an example, or like, you know, being a singer. And, you know, being a professional singer, it was like already pretty stressful before the pandemic, right? You know, like we put up with a lot in our industry, and, you know, feelings of frustration and disempowerment and all of this are unfortunately like incredibly common. And then like throw a pandemic into the mix and how that has affected what we do so profoundly. And things seem, you know, more magnified in a lot of ways. And so it's really easy, I think, for singers to fall into all these like negative mindsets, because it often feels like there's so much that's working against us. And we get into spirals with these negative mindsets, and it starts causing us a great deal of mental stress. And before we know it, we just start kind of like walking through the world this way and viewing everything through the lens of whatever negative mindset we're stuck in. Um, so while this kind of thing is normal, you know, I think it's important to have ways to help you get out of this and help you to reframe. Because, you know, like we of course need to acknowledge reality, and we need to acknowledge that we might not be able to change reality, but what we can change is our perception of it and how we react to it. You know, we can control our thoughts and how we talk to ourselves and how we talk about ourselves. And this is really critical, because how you think about yourself and your situation and how you talk about yourself can have a huge impact on your physical and your emotional well-being. So I think, you know, it's like, where do we start with all this kind of thing? So I think that the first step is to start cultivating gratitude. And, you know, because I believe that everybody has something to be grateful for, you know, like no matter what your privileges are, no matter like whether or not you're religious, no matter how hard or easy your life is, being grateful for what you have, it doesn't mean that you ignore your life's problems, because that's not helpful, right? It simply means that you don't let the problems become the lens through which you view the rest of your life. And, you know, I believe gratitude is important because it kind of begets humility. And humility begets charity and kindness towards other people. Because when you recognize the goodness in your life and the sheer abundance of what you've been given, you're spurred on to help others experience that too. And you start to make choices that lift up other people. And I think as an industry, that's really important, that singers do things to lift each other up. So this is different from like, you know, toxic positivity, and like, you know, this is not about like always finding the good in the situation, and you know, everything will always be okay, and, you know, like there's no need to feel sad, or, you know, like it's not about any of that. So what I'm talking about is, you know, from this place of gratitude and humility and abundance, being able to take ownership of your thoughts and your actions and your choices. Because when you do this, it allows you to assess the situation more objectively and acknowledge how it's making you feel and why. And, acknowledging how you'd like to be feeling instead. And discerning whether there's anything that you can do towards that end. So it's about cultivating empowerment for yourself and those in your life. So what are some concrete ways that you can start cultivating gratitude? So you might have heard of like a gratitude practice before. Maybe like you have, maybe you write down 3 things every day, or whatever number of things you want. It doesn't have to be 3, that you're grateful for that day. So maybe you have a journal, a special journal where you do this, or maybe it's like a note in your phone or a document on your computer, or maybe you just verbalize it out loud. But having some kind of routine like this is important because writing something down or verbalizing it makes it concrete and makes it real. So when you do this every day, you kind of train your mind to view your world through this lens. Okay, that kind of brings us to the end of the stress portion. The last pillar that we're going to talk about is sleep hygiene. So we all know that sleep is important. We know from experience that sleep is important. But why exactly is that? So during sleep, tons of things are actually happening in your body behind the scenes. Your cells begin to repair themselves after facing the day's stressors. Your brain stores new information that you learned that day to be recalled later. Your body releases hormones and synthesizes proteins that are essential for muscle repair, for tissue growth, for good cognitive function. And guess what? Your immune system is hard at work when you sleep. Currently, the CDC, the good old CDC, recommends between 7 and 9 hours of sleep per night for adults, depending on your age, give or take. However, I realize that for some people, that amount of uninterrupted sleep just isn't possible every night. So maybe you have young children who wake in the middle of the night, or you have a job that keeps you up late or working into the night. But regardless of the amount of sleep that you're able to get each night, you can still do some things to ensure that it's quality sleep, even if it can't be those 7 to 9 hours. So having a nighttime routine that allows your body and your mind to wind down and relax is really important. So to fall asleep and quickly and stay asleep, you want to put your body in a state where that kind of relaxation is possible. So I wouldn't recommend hardcore workouts late at night or working right up until bedtime on your computer, or watching or reading anything that's going to stimulate your mind too much. So instead, read something relaxing, do some light stretching or deep breathing, maybe have relaxing aromas going. Warm beverages like decaffeinated tea can help you relax, or a hot bath or a shower. This kind of routine is especially important for when you get home from those late night rehearsals or gigs and you're tired, but you're also sort of wound up. So I think it's important to take the time to do something for yourself to help you prepare for sleep, rather than just trying to jump right into bed and fall asleep, because we know that doesn't always work when you're kind of up. One other thing that will help to get your body into a pre-sleep state is to dim the lights in your home, because our bodies have a natural circadian rhythm that corresponds to sunlight and darkness. I think it's dark at 4:30 p.m. in December and you feel like it's already time to go to bed. I mean, I feel like that. Maybe you don't feel like that. But it's because your body releases hormones in response to how much light it's perceiving in your environment. So the more light that it perceives, the more cortisol it's going to produce, because it thinks, hey, it's daytime. You need cortisol to do all the things that you need to do for life. The more darkness that your eyes perceive, the more melatonin your body is going to release. And that's the hormone that helps you sleep. So you don't want your cortisol levels to be up before bed. You want to activate your melatonin levels instead. And one way to do that is by dimming the lights and not staring at screens too much in the evening, or at least not at close range, no cell phone right in front of your face as you're going to bed. If you're a person who needs to wake in the middle of the night or find that that's a frequent occurrence for you and you have a hard time getting back to sleep, have like a mini version of whatever your routine is that will help you get back to sleep when you head back to bed. So maybe it's a mindfulness thing like we just did, like a body scan exercise, or maybe it's like some deep breathing or some stretching or something that will put your body into that relaxed state. So that's it for the sleep hygiene piece. It's like pretty straightforward, but also very important for your immune system. So I felt it was important to talk about it. All right. So to recap, we have our 3 pillars of holistic immune support, which are nutrition for gut health, which means eating fiber-rich and protein-rich foods and reducing sugar and processed food intake. Stress management, both in terms of calming the nervous system with mindfulness and body awareness, and cultivating positive mindsets of gratitude and abundance so that we don't feed chronic stress. And the 3rd pillar, which is sleep hygiene and the importance of having a routine that prepares your body for sleep. So I'd like to hear from you guys. What did you find most interesting? What was kind of like your biggest takeaway? You can type in the chat or you can unmute. Nighttime routine. Awesome.
So I had a question, Alan, if that's all right.
Sure.
I thought it was a little too complex to type out, but so in regards to gut health, that's something that is very important to me and I try to be good about. I don't know if this falls in the category of like supplements, but sometimes I feel like probiotics are helpful, or in the past when I've been sick, I've taken probiotics and they've kind of brought me back to life. Do you believe that like helps along with gut health, or is it just depending on the person?
Yeah, absolutely. I think probiotics are really helpful. Um, so, everybody's different and like there are a lot of probiotics on the market, but there are some good ones that are being developed, as like we learn more about how the gut works. And, I take a probiotic and I found it to be immensely helpful. It's like one of those things where like within days, just a couple of days of taking it, you feel like positive differences in your body. Um, so that's not the case for everybody, but I do believe that for many people they are helpful, especially if you're taking something that's good quality. Yeah, and it can be really helpful to do that. Like if you ever have to go on antibiotics, right? Because antibiotics target all the bacteria in your body, like not just the bad ones. They do a great job at killing the bad ones, but they also kill the good ones. So taking a probiotic is going to help to kind of replenish that gut flora. So that's a good point as well. You mentioned coming back from illness. I know stress affects me super negatively, but seeing it in a factual way was a nice reminder that I really actually take the time to cultivate gratitude. Yeah. Yeah, being intentional is really important. And I think we forget that. Like we kind of walk through life and like we have thoughts and they're momentary and they kind of come and go and but it's important to check in with yourself and see like where your mind is at, where you are on any particular day. Yeah, urgent need to greatly lessen or eliminate processed sugar due to the high risk to metabolic health. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Any other thoughts from anybody else?
I had a question. Actually, I was wondering if you could just
Sure.
explain the relationship between stress like cortisol and the immune system again? Because you said stress, cortisol obviously has a negative impact on the immune system, but you also said if you run out of cortisol, that likewise also like has a detriment, some sort of detriment. I was wondering if you could explain that little like relationship between like you have to find a balance sort of, or how does that?
Yeah, right. So too much or too little cortisol is going to hamper your immune response. Um, so if you have too much cortisol, it likely means that there's other hormones that are out of balance. It also just means that like your stress levels are elevated, and so in the hierarchy of systems that your body thinks are important to fight the proverbial bear or do their stressful thing, the immune system doesn't really make the cut. So it's not going to be allocating resources to fighting those to fighting whatever pathogens or bacteria are coming your way. Um, does that make sense as far as like the high levels of cortisol?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And if your cortisol is too low, so, because one of the things cortisol does is it helps to moderate the inflammatory response. So, like, for example, say, like, you bang your elbow against something, how it might swell up and get a little bit red. So, cortisol will immediately travel to the site where the injury happens, where the stress happens. And if it did not, that injury would swell up, to the size
Oh,
of a baseball.
okay.
So we need cortisol to help regulate that inflammatory response. And if we don't have it, um, we can experience inflammation throughout the body, which is bad for your immune response.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Are there any other questions or thoughts? Okay, cool. Um, I think, did I have one more slide? Let me just share my screen real quick one more time. And I will put those things in the chat for you. Those handouts I was talking about. Whoops. I don't know why it keeps going backwards. Nope. Nope. Here we go. Okay. So yeah, there will be the handouts that I'll put in the chat in just a sec, and also a feedback form. I just appreciate people's feedback as I do more of these workshops this fall, and take this to more people. Um, so yeah, the other thing is, if you feel like you're really resonating with some of this stuff and you want to learn more, maybe you want some more specific guidance with your nutrition, or more support with stress management, or supporting holistic health generally. If you'd like to get more personal support and talk about what that looks like, or have more clarity on whatever challenges you're facing, I would like to invite you to meet with me for a complimentary session. Um, and we would talk about the challenges that you're facing, and how what we talked about in the workshop today is kind of a starting point, and how you can apply it more particularly to your own life. So we would go a little bit deeper and apply it on a more personal level. So if you would like to take advantage of that, there is a little box in the feedback form where you can check yes or no if you would like to book a free session. Um, and once I get your response, I'll follow up within a couple of days, because I'll be doing a couple more of these workshops this fall, and I want to make sure that I can book everybody in before my schedule kind of fills up. Um, and even if you think you're not ready for the one-on-one session, I'd ask if you'd be so kind to fill out the form anyways, since the feedback questions are helpful, and, as I tweak things, and just take this to more people. Okay, so let me stop the share, and I'm gonna put those things here in the chat with this. Let's see. Here is one. So that's the list of the healthy breakfast sugar swaps. And I'm also going to put in this Singer's Mindset Toolbox. So this is a resource that has like some journaling prompts and just some ways to walk through the mindset stuff that we talked about and reframe things. The questions on here are like geared towards the singing career, but like they can also be applied to other areas of your life. You know, I think that you can all extrapolate that. You'll see what I mean when you look at the handout. And the link for the feedback form is here. Hopefully that works for you all.
I just clicked on the link and it said this form can only be viewed by users in the owner's organization, and I need.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing. Thanks, Jess.
Oh, okay. So it's this. Oh, it's like the from the other form that we had. Let me see. Mm-hmm. That should just be like under settings, huh? Like I'm not sure.
Or maybe it needs time to reset, because I know when for the form for the workshop we had that issue.
Yeah.
But it went away after like within the day. So I'm not sure if it needs time.
Oh, really? Okay. That's interesting. Well, so you didn't actually change anything on the settings then for that other form?
I did reset it because there wasn't any other like setting to like turn on or turn off.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe it
I
just
think
needs,
the
like...
setting is when you click share, it will give you a checkbox of limit. Having made this mistake a million times, it's in the box that clicks share when you click.
Okay.
Julie Mar, do you want to make a couple quick announcements for BSR while we're figuring out these last steps?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, if we could all give a virtual like clap for Ellen and her wonderful presentation. Definitely something that we all need, and I really wish more people were here to see this. It's definitely something that needs to be repeated so that people can be more educated, more mindful to take care of themselves, and et cetera, especially us special artistic beings. But thank you so much, Ellen. And if you are not a BSR member, you can go to our website, bostonsingersresource.org. We're doing a lot of changes, a lot of good things coming forth this season. Great resources, such a great community. We're becoming very expansive, and there's a lot of great things coming up in the next few months. Margaret, I don't know if you have any other things to add.
We love singers. Come join us. Julie Mar said it all, and we're so grateful to Ellen. Great job tonight, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for hosting this. This was a lot of fun, and glad to have the opportunity to connect with you all.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, I just I posted the link again just out of curiosity to see if it would work. And if you can't, Kim said she doesn't see the downloads because she's on her phone. So I'll make sure the downloads get emailed to you also if you can't grab them from the chat. Still can't get the link to work. All right, I'll figure it out. And I'll send this form to you all. Hopefully tomorrow I can get that figured out. And yeah, because I want to hear from you guys and hear your thoughts.
It's under
all right.
responses, settings, responses. It's the second one down. So that'll give you a chance to fix it.
Responses.
So we'll follow up with everyone
Okay.
with the link and more information. Julie Mar, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, cool. Try it now. I just changed the thing.
Woohoo! There it is.
Hooray. Okay. Thank you, Margaret.
Woo.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's all I have for tonight. So, thank you all for coming.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah,
Margaret,
and
Ellen, again, big hand to everyone in attendance.
yeah,
We hope to see you in another event, virtual, in person, at another time. Thank you all so much.
thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you, Julie Mar.
Thank you.